Okay, so now we can take a look at Act Two, Scene One. And in this scene, we're picking up right from where we left off at the end of Act One, which is after the Capulet Ball. So all of the guests have just left, and Romeo and Juliet have just found out that they are madly in love, but unfortunately with an enemy. And in this scene, instead of going home and trying to figure out a plan, Romeo is going to ditch his friends, climb over the Capulet wall, which is pretty dangerous considering he's the enemy, and go see if he can find Juliet. He doesn't really have a plan. He's just kind of letting fate take him where he will, which is very much a thing for Romeo. If you remember before the party, he kind of said the same thing, like, let what sails direct me where they may, and whatever is going to be will be. So we'll start reading slash listening to Act Two, Scene One together, and I'll pause every now and then to explain something that I think is really important for you guys.
Can I go forward where my heart is here? Turn back, dull earth, and find thy centre out.
He climbs the wall and leaps down within it. Enter Benvolio and Mercutio.
Romeo! My cousin Romeo!
He is wise, and on my life hath stolen him to bed.
He ran this way and leapt this orchard wall. Call, good Mercutio.
Nay, I'll conjure it too. Romeo, humours, madman, passion, lover, appear thou in the likeness of a sigh. Speak but one rhyme, and I am satisfied. Cry but, ah me, pronounce but love and dove. Speak to my gossip Venus one fair word, one nickname for her purblind son and heir, young auburn Cupid, that shot so trim when King Cophetua loved the beggar maid. He heareth not, he stirreth not, he moveth not. The ape is dead, and I must conjure him. I conjure thee, by Rosalie's bright eyes, by her high forehead and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the demesnes that there adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us.
Okay, so at this point, it's pretty obvious that Benvolio and Mercutio, even though they're Romeo's best friends, they have no idea that Romeo is no longer in love with Rosaline. And so what we see is Mercutio says, I conjure thee by Rosaline's bright eyes. Right? So in this case, we know that he thinks that if he calls for Romeo in the name of Rosaline, that she will make him kind of reappear. And they're making fun of him, right? They're saying, like, show up and do what you always do, sigh and talk about love and be all depressed and think about Rosaline and all of her beauty. And then he kind of brings up all of the good things about Rosaline that he thinks Romeo might be really interested in, like her high forehead, her scarlet lips, her nice feet, her straight legs, her quivering thighs, and you kind of get where he's going with that.
And if he hear thee, thou wilt anger him.
This cannot anger him. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it and conjured it down. That were some spite. My invocation is fair and honest, and in his mistress's name I conjure only but to raise up him.
Come, he hath hid himself amongst these trees to be consorted with the humorous night. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark.
If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree, and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. Romeo, good night. I'll to my truckle bed. This field bed is too cold for me to sleep. Come, shall we go?
Go then, for 'tis in vain to seek him here that means not to be found.
Okay, so they're giving up looking for him. And kind of what this whole conversation between Mercutio and Benvolio shows us is this kind of very playful side of Mercutio. He's using a whole bunch of puns to make fun of Romeo, to make fun of the fact that he loves this woman who won't love him back and specifically won't sleep with him. And Benvolio, ever rational, is like, all right, let's just go. It's, 'tis in vain to seek him here that means not to be found. So basically, there's no point in looking for Romeo If he doesn't want to be found, he's not going to be. And then that brings us to scene 2. So Romeo's been hearing this the whole time, and that's where this scene opens. He was listening to them, but choosing not to respond to them. And instead, he's now found himself inside the Capulet Garden, where he's just kind of wandering around aimlessly right now. And I'm not sure if he really has a good plan. Probably not, because he could very easily be killed for being on enemy territory right now.
He jests at scars that never felt a wound.
Juliet appears above at a window.
But soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I'm too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. 2 of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven, all through the airy region, stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek.
Okay, so this is obviously one of the most famous speeches from this whole play. And what you kind of have to realize is he's in this garden and he's wandering around, and then he just happens to look up, and standing on the balcony, he sees Juliet. And so everything he's just said is a soliloquy. He's saying it to us, but she doesn't hear him at all. In fact, she has no idea he's standing there. So everything Juliet is about to say, she says thinking she's just talking to herself. But if we look at what Romeo says here, obviously this is one of the most famous lines, right? But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. So he's comparing here Juliet to the sun, right? She is the sun. And she is bright like the sun. And he says, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, right? So as she kind of comes into view, it's comparing her to like the sun rising and taking the place of the moon. And he says that she is more beautiful than this moon. And then he sees her and he says that she speaks and she says nothing. Right? So what does he mean by that? Well, something about the way she's looking, it's like he can see her mind thinking. He can see that there's something going on inside of her head, and the way that her eyes are moving, her eyes are talking. And he wants to say something. He says, I'll answer it. But then he thinks about it again. He says, no, I'm too bold, right? He doesn't want to like interrupt, because it's not to me she speaks. So instead, he just kind of stands there, still staring at her, still looking at her. And then he ends his soliloquy with this: oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, right? He sees her, and she's leaning her cheek upon her hand, and all he wants to be is a glove on her hands so that he could touch that cheek indirectly.
Ah, me.
She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night being o'er my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven unto the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him when he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air.
So again, she still doesn't hear any of this. So every time you see that little word aside next to Romeo's name, that means he's not speaking directly to her. He's speaking to himself / the audience, explaining what he's thinking, right? She said something. She said, I, me. I'm like, not only is she beautiful, but it's a beautiful voice too. And then look at what she starts talking about. So again, keep in mind, she's not speaking to him, she's speaking to herself / the audience. So we're getting kind of a really close look at what Juliet thinks right now, and Romeo just happens to be overhearing it, which is going to be pretty embarrassing for Juliet.
Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet.
So again, another pretty famous line, right? Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Most people see this word wherefore, and they think that it's where are you, right? But she's not asking where are you, Romeo. Wherefore actually means why. So she's saying, why are you Romeo? As in, why do you have to be a Montague? And then she says, deny thy father and refuse thy name. So forget about being a Montague. No longer be a Montague. Or she says, if you won't give up your name, if you just swear you'll be my love, I'll no longer be a Capulet. So she's already made up her mind that she'll wholeheartedly stop being a Capulet, give up her family. She doesn't care about the feud. And Romeo's now just heard all of this. So before now, he wasn't 100% sure that Juliet felt the same way as he did, but now he knows, except she has no idea that he knows, and she has no idea that he's standing in her garden right below her listening. So imagine how scary that is when she finally does realize that.
Aside.
Shall I hear more, or shall I speak at this?
'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all myself.
Okay, so this again, another super famous speech, right? She says, what's a name? A name doesn't mean anything. It's not a part of you. It's not a hand. It's not a foot. And she says, if we had a rose and we called a rose something else, it'd be just as amazing. And if Romeo were in a Montague and he were instead Tom Jones, he would also be just as amazing. And so she wants him to forget about his name, forget about his family, and in exchange, she'll give him all of her.